Welcome back to the SaaS Playbook, where we pull back the curtain on what it actually takes to build something meaningful in the B2B space. Real founders, real journeys, no PR spin, no polish. This episode is brought to you by Hera Digital, revenue architects who build sales engines B2B businesses actually need. If it resonates, drop a comment with the word engine and someone will reach out to you. Today's guest has a philosophy that runs through everything he does. Be a partner, not a vendor. He's spent 20 years across sales, marketing, and GTM leadership, and he's taken the experience to build something genuinely different. Jeff Swan is the founder of Outbound SOS, a done-for-you signal intelligence service that helps B2B companies selling into government and find and win opportunities before RFP even exists. No spray and pray, no generic intent data, just real human-validated signals delivered straight to your CRM. Jeff Swan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. It's great to be here.
Now, going back down memory lane, you spent 20 years running a government sales playbook before you even realized it was a playbook. When did that pattern finally click, and what made you decide to build a business around that playbook?
You know, I've had quite a varied history of clients in all different types of industries. And, it's really been focused on one of my really big things earlier on in my career was taking companies up market. So taking them in like SMB, taking them into enterprise or mid-market, taking B2C companies into B2B, like that kind of stuff, where it was just like this huge change. So I've dealt with companies, I've worked with companies of all different industries across all 6 continents. And what was incredible as I set out this thesis, my last long-term contract. So I've done a little bit of fractional CRO work. I've done, my own business ventures along the way. And my last big contract was in B2G. It was in the transit space. And that was the last time I decided I was going to be a CRO in any way, shape, or form. I really thought I could do a lot better by sharing what I do with the world in a more, I guess you could say, a more founder capacity as opposed to, somebody on my client's executive team. But when I looked at it, when I started to make that shift, I went, wow, I have worked with a lot of B2G companies, a lot of different ones in different spaces. And even my own venture, one of my last exits for my own company was in the flood mitigation space. And I started mapping out how I actually got people in my pipeline. And I was like, this is crazy. I've been doing the same thing over and over and over again without even knowing it. So this is probably, I sold that in January 2023. And that was the start of this whole project. That was the start of this whole research project that I've taken for the last 3 years. Yeah, it's incredible the patterns that you find out when you look. They say hindsight's 20/20, and that was so real in my case.
People who become really great at their vertical or that thing that they are really good at often see patterns. That's how they identify. For me, at least in my brain, everything is a formula, right? Everything is a formula. You just got to figure out what that formula is. And essentially, this applies to what you were saying with the playbook, with GTM motions, but also being able to do it effectively, right? So I want to know what's in this playbook, but obviously we won't spill the beans too early on in the podcast. Maybe I'll pick your brain later on.
Mm-hmm.
But at one point you had 100,000 person sales community and you were part of a automation wave. Then you walked away from it entirely. What did you see that made you change directions completely?
Well, so I was in co-leading a micro community within this larger space, and we saw probably like 80% of the sponsorship was just in our group. But we used to gamify sales, so we'd have like sales competitions, who could book the most meetings in a week. We did a March Madness promo a few years back where we actually had brackets and everything, like people going head to head. Can I book more meetings than you, Jenny? Yeah, okay. I went on to the next round, and it was such an incredible hype. But what was interesting is actually, as I'm speaking with all our participants, I had, my company was very focused on sales coaching at the time. So I naturally progressed into leading this team of like a few thousand people without, signing their checks or anything like that. But what was incredible is seeing the different tactics that they used. So some were batch and blast. Some of their managers, their actual managers would say, you have to send 1,000 emails a day. You have to, make 200 calls in the mornings, and things that are possible. They're absolutely possible. I'm sure in your world, it's very similar to my background too, is like you can do all of these things through automation. But I noticed that the people who really crushed it and did really well, they weren't the ones automating everything. They were automating some things, some portions. And we came up with these specific areas where automation makes so much sense, monotonous tasks. I even know that booking this interview with you, your automated Calendly and all those things that you have at the back end, those are things that make sense for automation because they're things that are already engaging in our conversation. But when it comes to actual sales and dealing with the people that you're trying to help, it doesn't make sense to automate that first touch interaction. Like you're very familiar, I'm sure everybody does. First impressions, you only get one chance to make the first impression. And if your first impression is some automated script that you got from an AI or automated tool, and it's delivered in a way that very clearly is not coming from your desk, you've already crushed that first impression, and not in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's only so much fish in the ocean you can really get to. And I agree. When it comes down to sales, a few points I wanted to add to what you were saying is salespeople are like horses, right? No matter what the race is, we will run 100 miles an hour to that flag, regardless of where we are. And there's something common about great salespeople and the way in which we're wired. I think we're wired extremely competitive, and there's a reason why there's particular type of people that are really suited for sales and particular people that are really suited for finance, for example, right? And it's interesting because as I was sort of developing my career, I used to be really shy and timid, Jeff. I'm not sure if you believe
No,
that, but not a
I
lot
don't believe that at all.
of people say no chance, right? And I'm like, well, sales actually helps me come out of my shell, right? And it's about resilience. And I just don't think with the landscape of AI, sales reps or BDMs or really going to have those hard skills anymore. Yes, they can automate the back end, just like you said, where the touch is not as favorable or it's not really going to move the needle forward. With the inception of AI agents to handle all of this back and forward, it's great, but you don't even have to be a trained eye to tell that that's AI responded. Right? You don't need to and more people are going to learn the behaviors of AI and recognize those patterns, right? So how does a business then really stand out? And especially if they're doing email or parallel outreach methods, how does Outbound SOS really make a key difference for your clients to really stand out in such crowded environments now?
Yeah, well, the key is timing. It's that identifying timing windows for when is the right time to reach out to a company or a government agency. I work mostly in government, so for me, it's about finding that pre-RFP window. That's what I call about 3 to 12 months before RFP is about to launch. That's the window that you want to be in because you want to be able to shape the criteria before it even becomes written in stone and approved by this massive community of people that make decisions. So I find that for me and my clients, that has been the spot to really focus that AI and automation, what have you. That said, I just launched a podcast yesterday with a accompanying YouTube video that walks through how I actually do this process. So I've kind of given the process light or the RevOps light version of it in my YouTube video. You can imagine my templates are way more complex, but I didn't think that would be very suitable for your average audience. But essentially, my process is very simple. You start with a goal. Number one is, what are you trying to achieve? So I like to start at the top. So I don't know. Have you ever done OKRs? Have you ever done that?
No.
No, this is a huge thing from Google, like a few years back, where you set this big, hairy, audacious goal, and it might be they use the example of the Super Bowl, so that an NFL team wants to win the Super Bowl. That's the big goal, and then all these micro goals come underneath. So I like to set that big goal of like, where's the North Star? Where's this team trying to get to? Typically, something like we want to grow 200% year over year growth, that kind of thing. Then we want to talk about the task goal. So what is the specific task you're trying to accomplish? For me and my clients, we're trying to build target accounts lists that we know we can help now and that are going to want to engage with us because they need our help even in setting the criteria, right? So we map out the process very simply. We just literally look at Now, in my consulting practice, I would actually stand there at the desk and I'd watch the keystrokes. What are they doing? How are they actually researching clients? How are they finding phone numbers? How are they doing things? How are they picking up the phone? Like even just picking up the phone. And we would map out all of the roadblocks, the things that are standing in their way. And then from there, we would automate specific components along there. Now, the only automation that has been kind of like popular to sell these days from vendors is just that email. There are so many points along that line where you're wasting time, you're doing all these things that you shouldn't be doing. Yeah, we've identified that. It's a very simple process, but that's it.
That was the inception of AI, I guess, and that was the whole point, was to automate those really mundane tasks. But also, it really detracts that rep or that team from actually, one, moving the needle forward, but actually making a meaningful impact when it comes to actually solving that problem for that customer. And I think we've had a few salespeople on the podcast. Also, there's a few things that a lot of us have in common. And that is, at the end of the day, what are you actually helping your customer with? And are you being able to deliver that confidently? And with AI, I just don't think you can train and give it the knowledge base and the skills as much as you can, but you cannot replicate that human touch. That people are actively trying, by the way. But
They do.
before we get into, by the way, as well, if you want to go and check out that video specifically from Jeff, we'll plug that link below so you can go straight over there. But also, I wanted to dive in a little bit about what you mentioned about timing and RFPs, particularly being able to inversely create the RFP because of that timing. So for someone who hasn't heard about Outbound SOS or how Outbound SOS makes a big difference when timing is allocated and what time do you reach out, et cetera, what would you say to them?
Well, the trick is that everybody that I talk to knows very much, like everything there is to know about their process, yet knows nothing about how that process gets there. Or not, I shouldn't say nothing. There's some really switched on people that I've talked to, interviewed and all that. But most people just look at it as a sales process. And I'm sure you've seen this before. They look at it as a sales process as opposed to guiding the buyer's journey. And so they look at it from what are the steps I need to take to get to that person. So if you think about just an outreach, a simple outreach, I'm going to build a list. I'm going to email them. I'm going to call them. Those are three very, very simple tasks. And they look at how can I automate these three tasks? The thing is that if you're looking at that first step, when you're doing the research and you're learning about that account, when you have that call, you're going to have a much better call. When you write that email, you're going to have a much better email because you're actually touched in to that environment right there. But you're talking about timing, so this is really important. Now, it's not just a task. It's actually, okay, so how do I actually figure out how that this is the right time to reach out to my client? Well, what we do is we have actually mapped out hundreds, maybe thousands of sales processes. And we've seen significant patterns of like, okay, here's the very last step that happens. Here's the second last step, the third last step. And we figured it out that there is almost in every single case, the pre-procurement cycle is about 12 to 18 months. So this would be when they're starting to think about solving a problem to the time they actually launch an RFP. We've mapped out these definitively. Now, every client is going to be different and every company is going to have a slightly different spot on that time frame. Some are going to be 6 months, some are going to be 3, but most are in that 12 to 18 months category. And so what we do is we take what they're looking at, we take their RFPs that they've won, RFPs that they've closed, and then we use that as a proxy to look out in the market to find out all of the different deals we can find just like that one right now. So this is where AI comes in handy, because if I was physically looking for all these RFPs, you'd never see me again, Jenny. I wouldn't have time to do this podcast. We have to use AI. So we've trained it to look for specific things in specific locations like board packets, council minutes, RFP portals.
Yeah.
But then we've trained it to look at that. So then what we do is we actually map out that process and identify if 6 months ago, this client was using signals 6 months ago, what would it have found? And then we train our system to map that process for them specifically in the deals they're most fit for. And then it learns, we create kind of like a spec doc for it. And then every time we run signals for them, It knows that exact process, the exact locations for where to find everything, and then what are the meaningful moments at that time. So what's interesting too is we look at, I love government for this reason. The council minutes literally say what they say. They say what they have, talk tracks. They have all of these, their decision making, the questions they ask, how they answer them. So you can actually learn what caused that decision. So that allows us to create these signals based on exactly what we're looking to see.
What landed for me is actually the data behind the formula. Everything is data driven. And something that someone said as a guest on this podcast, and has stuck with me still to this day, is you have the data, but so what? What are you doing with that data, right? And I think what you've done and you overlaid with what you've been able to implement with Outbound SOS is actually being proactive, but also using that intelligence and that data set to actually go and get and replicate that. So it's very similar in the strategy that we often use for our clients as well. And I'm like, okay, well, leads generally is not the problem. Generally, it's actually something a bit more to do with the process or the pipeline and the stages and the nurture strategies. But a lot of the times, why are we trying to go outside? Why don't we look at the best client that you have and you want 10 more of those? Let's start there, right? That's the best way that we can look at it, right? Once we nail that and nail that formula, then we can start to really bleed into other personas or departments, or, just focus on one vertical at a time. Then we can really determine what are the levers we can and cannot play with. And that's something I will die by because I'm like, you're trying to do all of that when you haven't got this figured out yet.
I'm with you on that hill, by the way.
Yes. Come join me.
Yeah.
But I think especially as well, Jeff, like you said, government entities, they say it how it is, right? They can't have that fluff, and there's no room, well, they don't have any space for egos. It's black or white, right? Which is super handy for a strategy standpoint. But when it comes down to RFPs specifically, and maybe that's just me in my opinion, but RFPs is never a position of where I would think to focus on, I guess, to center the business around. And I think that's what makes Outbound SOS really stand out. Not only the RFP space, but also the predictiveness.
Yes. Yeah. Like you say, Jenny, the data is really where it is. AI slop exists because it doesn't have the right data. It can do anything you want it to do, but if you don't tell it correctly, it might think the sky is purple. If you're trying to make an image, right? Like if you don't have the information input into it, it doesn't do anything. So I see all these tools out there, and in your space, you've probably tried tons of tools, but like there is so much crap out there. I remember I did a podcast. Are you familiar with Jason Bay or
No,
Daily?
no, I can't say that I do.
They're big in my space. They were huge members of my community, and they're really well known in the sales coaching and consulting space. And we did a little, was it 2023? No, it was like 2021, I think. And one of our questions, we did a panel. So it's like a Christmas panel, the last podcast before Christmas. The one topic of conversations, if you think about it, this was 5 years ago. And we asked, what was the biggest fail in sales this year? And it was AI. And we talked about how AI was the biggest fail because the messaging wasn't quite there. It was very robotic and all of that. And then you fast forward 5 years, and I mean, AI is literally writing everything for people. It's doing so much. It's gone a long way since we thought it was a complete freaking failure. But now we're looking at different problems, is that because even from the personalization standpoint, is that your average seller who doesn't know anything about sales can actually personalize something for you. So you can tell Jenny what to say to Jeff to try to get him on a podcast, like through the messaging, right? But it's not really that good. Like you say, but earlier today in this call, is that people are starting to see through it, and they're recognizing, is that personalization real, or is it actually just something ChatGPT said or Claude or what have you? So it's very interesting now to see that evolution, yet still it doesn't solve that is this human problem.
Someone's going to create an AI platform to filter out the AI. Eventually, I'm sure somebody will, if not already, to actually filter out, okay, what are real humans? And I think eventually over time we'll overcorrect, right? And it's still sort of really interesting because if you think about personalization, if let's say, for example, if we ask Jeff AI to find out more information about Hera Digital, for example, right, can only find out what is publicly listed. So If somebody else is running that exact same prompt and targeting the exact same person, guess what? The output is going to be exactly the same. However, the timing is different, is the only key point of difference, but also the actual messaging. So yes, we can personalize it, but how far down do you go to personalization? There's so many layers that we can pull on. And when I sort of think about my customers, there's never really, we can only prepare as much as possible. But it's definitely not as in foresight as I guess RFPs are, that we could actually predict, okay, in 3 months' time, they're going to go to market to this, da 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 da. So it's really interesting to see how that would play out outside of the RFP space. If you ever were interested, would love to explore that with you. But you're not selling another login or another SaaS platform, or you're not handing someone a list. Walk us through what a client actually receives from Outbound SOS and what do they do from it?
Yeah. So like your company, my company has gone through a phase of being a kind of a RevOps outsourcing, CRM friendly. We were a HubSpot certified partner, Salesforce, Marketo. And what we originally started this service as is an offshoot of our HubSpot certified partner program, where we were delivering true vetted account insights directly into the CRM. So we worked backwards from that because we stepped out of that program. It wasn't right for our business. So what we did was instead think about it. Okay, well, depending on, it doesn't matter what CRM you're using, this data is still going to be helpful for you. So what we do is we deliver something super freaking simple. It's just a CRM-ready CSV written in a way that can be read by any CRM out there, right? Not HubSpot specific fields or anything like that. It's just general first name, last name, that kind of stuff, right? Essentially, we do that, and then we also have an add-on service of actually implementing it directly in the CRM. The idea here is that these files are implemented. They're super easy for somebody to use, to just upload into their system and go. All the information is there at the salesperson's fingertips. You can use it no problem. So it's super simple, and we love it that way.
There's the beauty in that, and that's the juxtaposition of it all, is sometimes it actually can be so simple. It doesn't have to be so complicated. At the end of the day, you're solving a problem, or you're trying to guide your customers to potential buying customers, and they're the conduit and the guidance between getting from X to Y, right? And that's sales boiled down. But a lot of people forget that everything in life is sales. Everything in life is a transaction. So once I understood that formula, I was like, okay, that makes sense now.
Yep. Yeah.
And the quicker you figure that out, the quicker things become in terms of understanding how life sort of works. This is getting all philosophical, but and that's not the intention.
We love the
But
philosophy. That's what we're here for.
typical salespeople, hey,
Yeah. Let's talk about why we're important and what we're saying is important.
oh, look at me, I'm with salespeople. Now, you've landed on companies that sell to local governments as your sweet spot, but what is it about that buyer profile that makes your signal approach work so incredibly well?
They care so much. They really care. Like, even my phrase, don't be a vendor, be a partner, that comes from working with these types of companies, where I literally got into one of my consulting engagements and said, you got to change this. This doesn't make sense. Your salespeople are partner managers or partner associates or what have you. It didn't make sense to me because I didn't think of it the same way that they did. And it was because they want to make an impact in the industry more so than just get a sale. And so that care means that a solution like mine doesn't matter to batch and blast people. It doesn't matter for quick fix people. It matters to people who really care to deliver that great first impression and to become that invaluable resource to their buyer. And every single person that I've met, from a contractor who does sidewalk repair all the way up to a very sophisticated like defense software, they all care so much about the agencies that they sell to and the constituents they serve. Typically, these people are local too, right? So they are the people that they're helping with their product. So that I think that's why my message resonates so well with them, is because I know, and if there's anybody listening here, I know you care about actually helping your clients as opposed to just selling to them. And that's why I chose this, for one, because I care too, but also why it resonates and why it's actually working is because I care, my clients care, and the people that they sell to care too.
It comes down to, do you genuinely care about the proposed service delivery? And I'm just drawing on my experience here, but when you go through many, many years of sales, it almost makes you come out the other end and force you to care more, because previously, when you first start in sales, typically speaking, you're just about the numbers, you're just about the close, the conversions. Who can I beat? Who's next, right? Over time, it starts to become very meaningless because it's just numbers, right? And it's very fleeting. And over time, and if you still remain in sales or if you do sales as a service offering, it has to be more meaningful. And I think that's exactly why we've built our businesses, Jeff. It's because we want to make a meaningful change. Not to plug Hera again, but the way that I looked at lead generation and engines and RevOps is a lot of the times people approach this industry and just provide you leads, like a lead gen agency, right? But they don't look at the quality. They don't look at the sales process, the client sales process, and determine and diagnose where is the issue. There's no point plugging in more leads when we can't fix this core issue. But also, there's not many other businesses out there that focus on the conversions. They only focus on the leads, right? And that's a volume game, and maybe that works for your business. But I think to build something long term, you have to look at the end result, in this case being conversions. And that's why that's our key point of difference, at least. So hopefully that lands with somebody.
I think it will, and because the switched on people are listening to this, I know it. But I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into, I've already talked about how we map keystroke processes, right? We map the actual processes of salespeople. When some of my contracts were where I was the fractional CMO. And probably half or more than half actually was I was running marketing, and people would always think I was weird because they'd be like, okay, here's this beautiful office for you, Jeff. You can have a closed door office and be separate from everybody. And instead, I would put my desk in the middle of the sales bullpen. And I would sit there and I'd listen to everything. So even while I'm sitting there concentrating on my work, through osmosis, I'd be hearing everything that the salespeople are saying. I'd know the messaging, exact messaging they're working. I'd know what they were saying before they had that like high five, ring the bell moment, right? Versus the, got to take a walk.
Yeah, that was rough.
You know what I mean? And so when I even made the decision of like, could I make this a platform with a login and all that with SOS signals? Could I have this great tool and integrate it really well? Because my team knows all about RevOps and getting it into your CRM. And I thought, you know what would be even better is if the sales rep just had the information in the standard page. So if you think of a like Salesforce, I remember before they had Lightning, there was like this archaic, old school Microsoft looking type thing, like old technology. And then you'd have Zoom Info and it'd be this little square at the bottom of the page. And it would have like an iframe. So you'd have to scroll left and scroll right and do all these things just to get the data. And I remember even myself in my role with this RevOps expertise, I'd get so frustrated. I want to throw my computer. And then I'd try to train the sales reps and be like, what the hell are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? And I tried that with so many tools and none of them got it right. No matter how great the integration was, it was never great. And so I said, you know what? I just want my sales reps to just get it at the fingertips in the same way they do, get rid of change management, get rid of and that has been incredibly successful for me as a business because I don't have to think about change management. It's just more qualified, vetted data, not all this junk.
You've spoken like a true salesperson, that you want to be in the mix, like right in the heart of the action, right? Because that's almost like you said, osmosis, yes, but I think it's also because you osmosis their energy, right? There's something about sales energy, you're like, feed, it's exciting, da 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 da. And obviously, Wolf of Wall Street kind of energy. And it's true. I'm sorry, but it's true. And anybody would really resonate with that. And I think I remember someone said to me, our team was called ABC. I'm not sure if you know the reference.
Yeah, always be closing.
Yeah. So we named ourselves ABC, right? So I'm like, there's something about salespeople. I kind of miss it actually, but yeah.
You're always team ABC.
Yeah, well, hopefully. We can only try. But again, it still comes down to, now that I'm a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, not as much wisdom, but still doing things a bit more meaningfully. I think you get to choose who you want to work with rather than let's just get them in.
If you don't know this already, you have to share it with your listeners, is that there's a new ABC of sales, and it's always be curious. All right, look it up, make it your own. If you don't like it, throw it out and forget I said it. But I train my students with that, my coaching students, always be curious, because it shifts the mindset. Instead of, hey, let's go, it's what can I do?
And I actually have a counter for you, typical salesperson.
I love it.
So you know how sometimes you're in a situation and you're super nervous and you're like you physically have your heart beating, right? A good way to reframe that in your mind is think about little Jeff clapping for yourself.
I like it.
I love
I
that
like
so
it.
much, and it's changed everything, right? Not that we obviously experience that much anymore, but to any of those listeners out there, it makes such a big difference if you reframe. And I think the key point and the underlying message there is reframe things. It's not always as what it seems. But one last question for you, Jeff, before we tie up. Now, you've interviewed procurement heads and politicians privately, and one thing that came up every time was that moment you showed up like a vendor, it's over. For any sales leader trying to break into the relationship driven market, what does it actually take to make that shift when your whole team is wired to close and not curious?
Well, then that's actually because it is really about changing that mindset is like, again, why I get my SDRs to research as opposed to just call from a list is because I want them to really understand what's going on in that market before they reach out. And if you come in there with that mentality of, I'm the best salesperson in the world and I'm going to close super fast, then everything you do shows your commission breath, like that. Everything you do is about creating urgency, not rolling with urgency, creating urgency, which is not really possible. It's pushing the buyer to do something, pushing the buyer into this rigid sales process that works for me and not necessarily for them. And so if you really change that mindset of, no, I want to be curious, I want to learn everything there is to know about this. I want to learn about you and learn what are the problems that you're actually facing and do those align with me of what I can actually do for you? Because if I'm just trying to qualify you for my sales process, that's a very different thing than if I'm trying to qualify if I can actually help you, right?
And I think that's prevalent in salespeople, right? I think someone should actually genuinely psycho and analyze what it is about salespeople from a nature and nurture perspective that makes us so inherently successful, but also what makes us stick around for so long.
Yeah. You know what? It's that I think what you said earlier really is it, is that once you get a taste of that competition and you feel like it's really you, like if you want to be that one winning with the little Jenny clapping in the background, right? If you want to be that person winning and you get the taste of winning and there's something visceral about that. It just becomes your soul. And you want to kind of chase that again and again and again. And you know that every time I pick up the phone, every time I send an email or connect with somebody or shake hands at a networking event or something is that you know that that's one more step towards that goal and getting another win and getting another win. And it's funny. I've actually leveraged this in some of my writing on the new no vendors movement, but I like to use the F1 analogy for a lot of things because if you start in P16, you will not very, very likely win the race, right? So you need to get higher up. But why I'm mentioning that is that I actually watched the show last night, that Netflix show of F1, and one of the guys, Carlos Sainz, he was absolutely not doing well, right? Yeah, but he wasn't doing well, but he knew he had that taste of winning. He knew he had what it's like to get sprayed with champagne and all that other stuff, right? And he just the whole team had confidence in him, and then he goes ahead and gets P3. And I don't know what else he did. I'm not at that later episode or didn't watch the season, but like people had the confidence in him because he had that fiery instinct. He wanted to get back to the podium. And I think that any of us salespeople, you, myself, anybody that we work with, they have that mentality. I know what it takes to get back to the podium. I'm going to get there no matter what it takes.
If you think about it, salespeople are like the F1 drivers of business. And I also think inversely, F1 drivers will be great salespeople.
Agreed.
Right. Jeff, this has been a genuinely great one. So many laughs along the way. The signal intelligence models, the partners, not vendor philosophy, the honest look at what it actually takes to influence procurement process before it goes public. Links to connect with Jeff directly will be in the show notes along with his episodes on YouTube, and learn more about Outbound SOS, all in the show notes. But in the meantime, keep building meaningfully. Thank you for joining us, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny. Take care.